This is the video for Wednesday, November 18th for 11th grade English. We are still in Unit 2, or Week 2 of our unit on Wild West. This is the week where we're debunking the myths of the Wild West, and we're trying to understand what's really going on in the Wild West. And the thing about today is Maddie Ross, our main character, our protagonist, really tells us exactly what is going on in her Wild West. There's a lot of figurative language in the world of literature where you use metaphors and similes to try to explain the way things are, the way you see them. You try to draw comparisons. You try to find a deeper meaning and reveal it on the page. Maddie does not really do those things too much. She does, but only when she's thinking about religion and the way that she has these strong beliefs. When she's describing what she sees, she typically just tells us what she sees without a lot of romance or drama. So we're looking at metaphor, simile, and imagery today, but really what we're looking at is the absence of those things. Our unit understands are here, and the focus is on how the myth of the West is flawed. It romanticizes or dramatizes narratives that were extraordinary, not representative. But Maddie, our protagonist, doesn't really do this. She has little use for romanticizing or dramatizing the narrative. She is just not interested in that. She is speaking to us from a true, unadorned place. She is our real West. So we'll use the big Google Doc to organize our concepts, but this really is the big understand to take away about Maddie and how she works with our unit understands. We look to her to show us, well, tell us what your life was like. Let's not draw these mythical qualities around the world that you live in. Let's just look at you and what you're experiencing. Big Google Doc vocab for today. Big vocab that might show up in many places in your life. Sure, including the reading SOL, but really everywhere. The words are metaphor and simile. We're going to go back to the scene in the courthouse to find the simile and metaphors there. For now, just write these words out in your big Google Docs and define them. A metaphor, the basic definition is it's a comparison between two things. A simile is a comparison between two things using like or as. So those are the textbook definitions. More broadly, a metaphor is any moment where you are seeing things figuratively. You're looking beyond what they actually are into something they represent or remind you of. So, for example, literally, I am holding a coffee cup. That's the way Maddie would speak. I held my coffee cup. Figuratively, there's a lot of things represented by this. I'm going to compare it. I'm going to compare it to the stuffed animals I had when I was a little kid that brought me comfort and security. This does that for me now. It's like my adult stuffed animal. I like to have it nearby. I like to hold it. I like to sip from it. It makes me feel comforted. That is a metaphor. The stuffed animal of my adulthood is my coffee. A simile is if I were to just say, this coffee cup is like the stuffed animal of my childhood. If I were to use like or as, I just am a little more explicit in saying, I am about to use a metaphor. Drop it. That's a simile. Simile is a type of metaphorical thinking. Simile actually looks like the word similar, so that's a nice mnemonic device. A simile is when you say this is similar to this is like this. Metaphor is much more broad. So I could do a whole unit on just metaphor because it's so much a part of our thinking in our lives. When we say things like, my heart broke, we're using a metaphor. Anytime we're speaking in words that are bigger than the thing itself, we're using a metaphor. And my concept about Maddie is there just aren't that many metaphors and similes in her writing, not in her voice. We have her first-person narration, so we see inside her mind, and what we see is she doesn't really see things metaphorically. She sees them for exactly what they are. So I really had to dig to find some metaphors and similes, but I want to acknowledge that her voice is literal. She's going to tell us what she sees. She's incredibly practical. All the same, let's go back and find some metaphors. All right, So I brought us to the scene where Maddie has arrived to the courthouse to find Rooster and hire him. And what she finds when she gets there, in typical Maddie speak, is another crowd had gathered, although not as big as the one the day before. She's just telling us what she sees. She doesn't say another crowd had gathered, pushing and shoving each other like lemmings off the side of a cliff, or anything like that. She's just telling us, this is what I see. My thought was, well, they're not having another hanging, are they? They were not. Very specific, very direct language. But then here we do get a little bit of figurative language from her. She says the marshals were unloading prisoners and poking them sharply along with their Winchester repeating rifles. The men were all chained together like fish on a string. There we have it. Our simile. Not many, like I said, but this one is a nice example of a simile, metaphorical speak, where she's trying to draw a kind of comparison to show you what does this remind her of. And then she goes on in some metaphorical speak as well to say they were mostly white men. There were also Indians, half-breeds, and Negroes. This is literal. It was awful to see. But you must remember that these chained beasts, metaphor, they're not really beasts, but that's the thing she's going to say to try to help you understand what she thinks of them, were murderers, robbers, train wreckers, bigamists, counterfeiters, some of the most wicked men in the world. They had ridden the Hoot Owl Trail and tasted the fruits of evil. And now justice got up with them to demand payment. So we're moving into some metaphorical speak here in this second part. They had ridden the Hoot Owl Trail, which I guess is just a metaphor for they'd lived the wild side of life. Tasted the fruits of evil, very metaphorical. There's no actual fruit here that they're eating. This is a metaphor for they're eating the apple from the tree in the Garden of Eden. They're doing the original thing that Adam and Eve did. She's referring back to that original sin. They've tasted the fruit that they were not supposed to taste. And now justice had caught up with them to demand payment. So justice, another metaphor here, it's not actually coming after them. Justice, it can't go anywhere. It's just an abstraction. So justice is metaphorically catching up to them to demand payment. Another metaphor where you can't actually give someone money for the sin that you've done, though you can, but not in this case. This is metaphor for the way that she wants them to be held to account. Gosh, I'm using metaphor to describe it, the way she wants them to be punished. So a lot of metaphors right here quickly in a row, and then she even says, you must pay for everything in this world one way or another. There is nothing free except the grace of God. You cannot earn that or deserve it. Whenever Maddie speaks figuratively, it's usually in the context of her faith, where she reaches into a bigger abstractions about her belief system. And these moments are peppered throughout the book. For the most part, she's just going to tell us exactly what she sees and thinks. And that is why I find her to be a really compelling character. She doesn't get caught up in any myths. She doesn't get caught up in any romance. She just tells you what it is that she believes and sees. When she describes people, she describes what she sees. I guessed wrong to which one he was, picking out a younger and slighter man with a badge on his shirt, and I was surprised when an old one-eyed Jasper, built along the lines of Grover Cleveland, went up and was sworn. I say old. He was about 40 years of age. The floorboard squeaked under his weight. He was wearing a dusty black suit of clothes, and when he sat down, I saw that his badge was on his vest. It was a little silver circle with a star on it. So she's giving us the visual of what exactly Rooster looks like. There is some imagery here. She's painting a visual description of the man, but it tends towards the literal and non-flowery. So that's the task for today. We're going to look at chapter 4, and you can do that here in your book. I'm going to scroll all the way there. Short chapter. You can listen to it. I can't play it here, but you'll see. I'll flip through how quick it is. And that's what I'd like you to do. Your stem for today is since, whenever, although Maddie uses literal language. So I'd like you to capture that idea in referencing chapter 4. And that's it.